am so blessed to be able to serve him and allow him freedom to go on vacation and to have fun with the guys. And I'd be there too, except we knew that we were having company coming in from Pennsylvania, and we didn't want to miss that. And so it's been a good weekend for us. I have You Are What You Watch. Heard what you are what you eat. You are what you watch. I am the TV generation. TV was my babysitter when I was growing up. Romper Room, the original Superman reruns, Captain Kangaroo. How many remember the 6 a.m. Farm Report? In the beginning, TV included moral lessons. The Rifleman. If you ever watch the Rifleman reruns today, you'll see that the guy was teaching his son to not to respond in anger, not to shoot people just for the heck of it. Thou shalt not kill was part of the program. It was really interesting to see this now and realize how much television has changed. Comedies like I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke Would Chase, they wouldn't even allow the married couples to be in the same bed. But today we're at war with our culture, and the culture's at war with biblical morals and Christianity in particular. Just as I was influenced by Superman's fight for truth, justice, and the American way, recent generations are being influenced by a predatory power determined to stamp out all vestiges of biblical morals and traditional family values. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about the history of television and cultural morals. And I'd say this might be a stepping on toes message. It was kind of uncomfortable for me to prepare it. And partly it was uncomfortable because I see myself as needing to have my toes stepped on a bit. And so I wanted to show you, though, something very important that's going on here. The power of television to influence and invade our minds is much more powerful today than any previous generation has ever faced. In past generations, it was mostly auditory. There was radio 100 years ago almost, and there was, before that, there was oral culture, and there's been reading, books, and things like that. I think probably the first one that really shocked the nation was D.H. Lawrence or something like Lady Chatterley's Lover or something like that, where they started to break the boundaries of Christian values and biblical values. And so, but today you can have the auditory and the visual stimuli and even the physical stimulation as if you're in a movie theater and the speakers are pounding, you're getting all this stimulus, and your mind is being adjusted and changed to fit what's being shown on the screen. So your ability to, you can become immersed in it and you don't really understand how you're being influenced. So I wanted to share with you a couple stories and some history of television. And one of the things that really struck me was a friend of mine named Ron Fodor. His sister worked for ABC News in New York. And this was probably 15 years ago or so. And she quit because she realized that she would have stories that did not fit the political and liberal agenda that were going on in the country, in the media. And these stories that were legitimate stories that were counter to the prevailing themes were being cut and would not be allowed to be shown. And what's happening without our understanding and realizing it is that the moguls of media were telling us what to think and only giving us information that would allow us to see a certain perspective. And so subtly there's a war going on because after the early 60s, when the Bible was kicked out of the schools and the Ten Commandments were ruled illegal, it's not surprising we have so many murders now when we can't teach that killing is wrong. But ever since then, there's almost been like this agenda to toward destroy our values and our resistance to those themes and immorality. So why did ABC want to do this? Why did NBC and CBS want to do this? Well, the interesting answer for this was not necessarily that they had an agenda to destroy our values as values, but They wanted to do several things. They wanted to dumb down the populace, to reduce their ability to think and to debate significant issues. They wanted to teach them to respond to impulse. Why? To make a compliant and easily influenced consumer who would respond emotionally to whatever is presented to them so that they would go out and buy whatever was on the commercials. And so if you don't ever think anymore and you just respond to the beautiful lady who's selling a car or the man smoking a Marlboro cigarette, you will just want to be like that person unconsciously, subconsciously. And so when you see that product advertised or in the store, you will go and buy it. And so the more you are a willing and compliant consumer, the easier it is for them to make money off of you and make money through advertising. So their goal was to dumb down the population. Now it's interesting because they found that by lowering the lowest common denominator, they could entertain people with the most basic urges, visceral sexual impulses, or a desire for revenge. And this is a quote from 2 Peter, and it's just very simple. But these, like irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be caught and destroyed, blaspheming about matters which they are ignorant, will also be destroyed in their destruction. So, they wanted us to become creatures of instinct, just responding impulsively to whatever put before us. And that is so, I talked about this 2 weeks ago, that's called the reprobate man, who's governed by his body and not even by his reasoning mind, restraining himself, but just responding physically to whatever is coming before him. In the 1950s and early 60s, prime time would have plays like George Bernard Shaw, or symphonies, or tame comedies like Milton Berle and Red Skelton. Now, just think about that. By having classical plays on television, you're being taught to think and to be able to reason and to consider issues, Shakespeare and things like that. Great moral plays and moral lessons are being revealed. But by the late 70s, every comedy was predicated upon fornication. Think about this. Cheers, Seinfeld, Friends. The plot of the show revolved around who is going to have sex with whom outside of marriage. A subtle theme of sex without commitment was being promoted as the norm. The value system of sex outside of marriage was using comedy to lower our resistance to this mindset. Ha 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 ha! Isn't it funny? Ross and what's her name? And whatever. I've never watched Friends, but I did watch Cheers. And it was Sam and Diane or whatever. And it was all about, it's emotional attachment to get them to come together, but it was all outside of the commitment of marriage. Now, you don't realize it, but then you're being programmed by what programs you are watching. You are becoming what you watch. Now, it's interesting. We take something that God condemns and says is sin, wrap it in a comedy, and it lowers our resistance. And we feed on it on a daily basis until we become used to it. And then we accept it not only as a norm, but as a good. And now, soap operas have been on television since 1952. I don't know if they had adultery as their theme at the beginning, but by 1964, paid plays became a prime-time showcase for serial adultery. Daytime soap operas were targeted at housewives, tempting them to idle distraction, but giving them sin and immorality as their daily diet. And Timothy says, "But understand this, in the last days will come times of stress, for men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, inhuman, implacable, slanderers, profligates, fierce, haters of good." What is the list? Treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding the form of religion but denying the power of it. For among those avoid such people, for among them are those who make their way into households and capture weak women, burdened with sins and swayed by various impulses, who will listen to anybody and can never arrive at the knowledge of the truth. So what was the soap opera designed to do? It was go into women's houses who are stay-at-home moms and just go after their various impulses, make them feel dissatisfied or make them titillated. My point is not that all television is bad or inherently bad, but you need to recognize what kind of culture is being used against you to attack you and your commitment to Christ. If you watch things unthinkingly and you're not aware of the subtle messages underneath it, you are being influenced as you watch it, receive it, eat it in your spirit, and become immune to it. And we see that that's really happened in our culture. In 1998, the first show featuring a comedy about homosexuality was called Will and Grace. Again, the subconscious motivation of the networks is to lower the moral standards of the population to make acceptable what God calls sin. Now corporations who only care about profits are on the forefront of enforcing an anti-biblical moral standard upon the nation, and the media is in full gear calling traditional Christian values evil and lawless license good. It is not by accident that Wikipedia says, quote, since the final episode of the Will and Grace sitcom aired, the sitcom Will and Grace has been credited with helping and improving public opinion of the LGBT community, that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual community, with U.S. Vice President Joe Biden commenting that the show probably did more to educate the American people on LGBT issues than almost anything anybody has ever done. I mean, they're obviously, they have an agenda, right? So, now, if you agree with the scriptures, as Jesus does, and did, and you disagree with homosexuality and homosexual marriage, then you are the enemy of the state and are as backward and repugnant as racists. Never mind that the scriptures teach otherwise. The culture has condemned you, and you are enemy of all that is good. My point is not to condemn homosexuals, fornicators, or adulterers, the people involved. Not the sin is condemned by God. I don't have to do that. And my point is not to condemn the people who are in any of those relationships. My point is to show you how common forms of humor and entertainment are being used against you to lower your standards to a resistance to a worldview that is opposed to God. If you don't realize you are being manipulated by the world system and the prince of the power of the air, then you are being played like a fiddle as the enemy robs your house. You are, or you should be, at war with the world and its ways. Rather than accepting sin as good or as a norm, you should realize what you are taking into your mind. You should realize what you're feeding on with your entertainment. You should realize what you are what you watch, and it has an impact on your morals and your resistance to false values. Now, I've been focusing on television, and some of you don't watch television. Praise God. But I want you to be aware that it's not the only place where you can be influenced. You can read romance novels full of sex. You can listen to various music that can also impact you. Now, I realized this after I got saved in a while. When I was growing up in high school, I wasn't a Christian. I listened to a lot of soul music. And soul music emphasizes grief and sorrow and depression. And you know what? It had an effect on me. Where I began to gravitate towards grief and sorrow and depression. It didn't help that most of the girls I liked didn't like me. I mean, that fed into me listening to this soul music and soaking in sorrow and grief and self-pity or whatever. When Paul says we should not grieve like those who have no hope. We should have expectation of God's deliverance. But now I wasn't a Christian. I didn't know any better. But I realized that soul music was causing me to gravitate towards that expression and emotion and be almost like feel normal as if I was feeling sad. If I was feeling happy, not so much. Now, y'all know country western can do the same thing. My wife took my car and my truck and my dog. God, I miss my dog. It's out there everywhere, and you've got to be careful to what you're listening to, and what you're watching, because each of those things are telling you, giving you a message. And do those messages line up with God's purpose and plan for your life, and His Word, or are they things that are just anti-Him, and they're trying to lower your resistance so you become normalized to what's going on in the world? Do you see how hard it is for even Christians to stand up and declare something as sin, which God calls a sin, without being attacked by friends, family, media? What used to be no question about what's right and wrong is now a huge question about what's right and wrong. And with the church being compromised and not praying and seeking righteousness, then what can we expect the world to be changed if we are being absorbed and informed and motivated by culture instead of by the Word? So I have a story here. Do you let your children watch and be impacted by these shows? I heard a story about a man who was fighting with his children about television, what they were going to watch. And, my friends all watch this show. Can I watch this show, Daddy? Please. And he said, sure, you can watch the shows. Here's how it goes. I made you some brownies. Now, they look good. They're good. We put them out on the table for the kids. I want you to know, does it look good? Yeah. He said, you want one? Sure. He said, well, I put a little bit of poop in there. You won't ever taste it. Just try it. Don't worry about it. Just go ahead, it's nothing. You'll never even know it's there. The kids go, yeah. But that's what happens when you allow things that are not holy to influence your children. It's just a little bit of the brownies, a little bit of arsenic in the sugar. And this is more a thing with movies probably than with television, but television does it too. I don't know if I don't have cable, so I know there's a lot of songs on there. But what about horror movies and horror shows? I know a lot of people get all excited about vampires and this and that and monsters and alien abductions and alien inhabitations or whatever. But the root of those things is fear. And where does fear come from? Yes. Fear comes from Satan. It doesn't come from God. There is reverence for God, which we call the fear of the Lord. But real fear, terror, horror, does not come from God. That comes from the demonic side. It says there's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment. And he who fears is not yet perfected in love. Romans 8:15 says, for you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of sonship, and we cry, Abba, Father. Why watch things that create fear? If God is love, and love casts out fear, why entertain yourself with horror, demons, and darkness? What about witchcraft, spells and incantations, Harry Potter? God calls these things an abomination. Abomination, I had to look this up because I've heard that word so many times that what the heck does that mean, really? We don't use it anymore. And apparently it means something that's really disgusting and God hates it. It's something like, ew, like puke. It's something that you don't want in your mouth. So in Deuteronomy 18:9-14 it says, when you enter the land that God, your God, is giving you, don't take on the abominable practices of life of the nations there. Don't dare sacrifice your son or your daughter in the fire. Well, they use chemical abortions, chemicals that burn the child to death in the womb. Don't practice divination, sorcery or fortune-telling, witchery, casting spells, holding seances, or channeling of the dead. So what happens with Harry Potter? Spells, incantations. I don't know if they channel the dead. I never watched Harry Potter, but there's enough of them out there that do. People who do these things are an abomination to God. It's because of these abominable practices that your God is driving out these nations before you. Be completely loyal to God, your God. These nations that you are about to run out of the country consort with sorcerers and witches, but not you. God, your God, forbids it. Why should we entertain ourselves with things and take pleasure in things that God hates and finds disgustingly evil? Yet we have entire industries devoted to worshiping at that altar. God hates it, and we create entertainment out of it. Okay, that's the stepping on toes part. At the time, and I tell you what, when you're tired and exhausted at the end of the day, the last thing you want to do is I want to sit down and pray and read scriptures and meditate. You just want to zone out. But then when you sit down and you zone out, I'm tempted to do the same thing, and I do. I try to find things that aren't offensive to God and just watch. But I'm not so sure if it's very healthy for me or anyone. But it's easy. But the good news is there is an alternative. By contrast, Paul says in Corinthians, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled faces, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. If we are seeking the face of the Father and looking for him, reading his word as an adjunct to finding who he is, and spending time in prayer and seeking his face, we are being changed to look like him, act like him, walk like him, talk like him, love like him, and forgive like him. But if we're spending 5 hours a day in entertainment and 5 minutes with the Scripture, what is the balance? What's going on? What's really happening in our lives? Are we giving him enough time that our faces are being transformed to look like him, or are we absorbing what we're looking at and becoming like what we watch? If we are becoming conformed to this world in the ways by contemplating only evil continually, how are we going to reflect his glory? Philippians says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue in these things, if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Meditate on these things. Meditate on these things. How good is our God? How beautiful is our God? Who's sleeping with who? Okay, what's going on? There's a story that a friend said. David glanced at Goliath and gazed at God. A lot of times we're around gazing at Goliath while we kind of look towards God. So the last part of this is to beware of the news. The media makes money by reporting, never makes money by reporting the good things that God is doing, the Lord is doing over here and overseas. They keep our attention by reporting only what is bad, horrific, and tragic. There's evil aplenty in the world, but be careful not to give too much attention to the news and politics. It's enough to create grief, sorrow, anger, and discouragement. I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh when I was traveling back and forth, and I agree with him in a lot of, almost like 99.9% of the time. But I can't use him as a diet. Because all it does is stir up my anger and hostility over what's going on in the government. It just makes me mad. But why should I spend my time getting my soul worked up over things that I cannot change? I can do my duty in voting or whatever, but I can't, in prayer especially, but I can't change it. And spend all that time watching all the bad reports that are coming across the news and all the things that the government's doing and things that are attacking Christianity and the word of the Lord. Or I can spend that time gazing at God and then glancing at Goliath. All the news that we watch is not... when you go to other sites that are Christian-oriented, you find out how many people have been saved in Iraq and Iran and stuff like that, which you never hear in the scripture, in the media. God is moving in those countries we think are dead. Even among ISIS people, there have been conversions. But you don't hear that. And some of the people who were martyred led to the conversions. And I have a magazine I subscribe to. It's free, actually, but Voice of the Martyrs. And you hear stories of what God is doing rather than what the enemy is doing in the land. And I'm ready to nuke Iran right off the face of the map. But God's not ready to do that. Why? Because He's working there. Yeah, but we don't see that in the news. All we see is what's fed to us. And I'll just tell one more story here. I was taking a class in seminary called the Church and Pop Culture. I love this course. It's one of the most fun courses I ever did. And back then we had VCRs. You all remember what those are? Yeah. And they told us to record 2 news shows for the same day. ABC, NBC, CBS, those were the big ones at that time. And so we recorded 2. And it was interesting how, when you do this, and you can do it today on the DVRs or whatever, if they come on different times, what stories are chosen for you to watch each day? Unless it's something big like 9/11, and they're all on the same page, you'll find out that what they emphasize fits a political agenda. And it has to do with what they want you to know. They're not telling you how many people get saved on the earth. They're just telling you what they want you to know. So, I don't want this to become a legalistic, religious thing. I want you to think in your spirit about let God draw you to Him so that you prefer His presence to entertainment. Entertainment is, the word means distraction, to be distracted. And there are times, Bach would create music for God, but he also created music for just enjoyment. And there's time for that. If you're religious, you'll never have time for that. Because, like Joe and I like Monty Python. Some of it's very questionable, right? But the point is that there's things that are not inherently evil to enjoy life, to celebrate life. But there is something that calls us to, He's calling us to Himself. And we may not think we can get there. We've been so beaten down by this world, but I tell you what, that's a lie. If you return to Him, He'll return to you. And if you will seek His face, we will become even more a fellowship of love than we already are. And we'll become more like Jesus in the way we walk and think. And the things that normally upset us in the world will not upset us anymore, because we will see that our God is actually victorious over these problems. Even if we don't see it in our lifetime. But all the lies are being told about Christ and Christianity. There's a day coming when those things are going to be revealed as sin and a rejection of God. And so we can't fight His battles for Him. But we can seek Him and let Him exalt Him and let Him fight the battles for us. So would you pray with me? Lord, I come before you today and confess that my mind is distracted and I am not always seeking your face. And I don't have a good balance in my life of pleasure versus presence. And I pray, Father, that you would move in in my heart and all those here who are willing to have you move in their heart, that they might seek presence more than pleasure, presence more than distraction, and that we might become changed by whom we're looking at and set free from all the fears and anxieties that the world wants to place upon us. We pray, Lord, that you would teach us to walk with you in the cool of the day, enjoy your presence more than anything else, walk in love with you. In Jesus' name.